Welcome, everybody, to a live stream here on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. We're currently running live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter or X, depending on what you want to call it. We're excited for today. We've had a lot of activity on social media lately, and due to all the comments and the conversations going back and forth, which we highly encourage, that's what we're looking to achieve here in having people share ideas, share thoughts on what they've heard, what they see, and how we come to a navigation of our history that is primarily has been stored through oral history and really coming to an understanding of what our ancestors were able to accomplish. So, with that being said, we're going to spend a majority of our time up front looking at some of the social media comments that we've received here in the last few weeks. Actually, we've seen a lot of interesting comments going back and forth. Some are hilarious, some are serious. So it looks like we're getting a good range of people commenting and having discussions. So we're going to start with our YouTube podcast here and just kind of walk through some of the comments. Also, for everyone that's watching live, feel free to ask some questions and we'll go ahead and pop your questions up here on the screen here live and have some discussions. Since we are going live, as you're asking your questions and you have follow-up comments as we're going over the question, feel free to add them in the comment section and we'll visit them as we go along. So we're going to start off with, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here so we can get ourselves squared away. We're going to start with our YouTube channel. All right, so we'll start here. Let me go to a different layout here so we can get more visibility out of this. There's an initial comment here. We'll just start from the most recent and scroll down through some of the comments that were shared. So this one is from Tui. I'm assuming that's how it's spelled, 1404. So technically, if the political titles, land inheritance are passed down through the eldest male, that would make our current king, speaking of the king of Tonga, from Tupou the Fourth, a Tungi or Tu'iha Takalawa instead of Tupou. They are basically using their mother's last name. Yes, that's pretty accurate. I mean, that's traditionally in Tonga. Power and inheritance is going through the male line, and considering that Tupou the Third, Queen Salote, was a female, that was a unique situation. A lot of it was driven by the fact that Tonga was under political pressure. Tupou the Second's reign had led to some high levels of debt. That we were under threat of being colonized. That led to the Queen Salote being, brought in as sovereign overnight to help eliminate the threat. There's also a real possibility that internally, since the Tu'ikanukupolu was the third kingly lines that were created, there's the Tu'iha Takalawa, which is the Tungi name that you're mentioning there, Tui, was probably vying for position. You also have the Tu'itonga, which is now the Kalanivalu. They're probably also maybe looking at some opportunities there. It's human nature. That's what we go through. And so, yeah, that's really when you boil it down to, they maintain their mother's last name of the Tupou family because that's the Tu'ikanukupolu name. And the Tungi, which is their father, would have been in a way their last name, and that's where the inheritance of political power and titles would come through. So it was a unique opportunity in our nation to kind of combine two of the kingly lines and bring that over. Hey, David, appreciate the comment here. We'll go ahead and add it here to the feed so everyone else can take a look at it. How do you feel about the new telescopes they are developing on Maui and Haleakala? I'm not too aware of that, David. That may be something I'll have to circle back on to with you. But if you have some additional, maybe a link or some additional information there that we could pull up here on the live and kind of walk through and discuss it, that would be something I would be more than willing to bring up here on the live. So if there's any additional information there, put it in the chat and we'll walk through it as well. All right. Scrolling down here on the other comments, we have here from Pelibra, William Mariner called Samoa Ha'amoa back in the early 1800s. Yes, this is kind of one of the interesting things I have heard, especially online and through social media and other places, that Samoa has their own definition of the name Samoa and how it provides a an interpretation of being the center in the cradle. Obviously, from our perspective, it was, we call it Ha'amoa from Tonga. And I do want to clarify this idea of Samoa/Tonga as separate nations. I concede that this is a European construct. This is an outcropping of colonization. For all intents and purposes, Tonga, Samoa were one country, one nation. Even all of Polynesia was one nation. And so, as I use the terms Tonga and Samoa, we use it now because that's how we distinguish, quote unquote, nations. But for all intents and purposes, they were one nation and are one people. So I do want to clarify with that. But in regards to this comment here, yes, the Tongans have traditionally held the name Ha'amoa for Samoa, which is pretty much representing that is the family, the clan, the Moa clan that went to Samoa, and those were the ones who primarily inhabited and ran that island, apart from the Tu'imanua, which has a special relationship with Aho'eitu by sharing a heritage from the Tangaloa. But obviously, our perspective is that Aho'eitu inherited the power directly from Tangaloa and gave that to him. One thing that I also wanted to kind of bring up here in some of our discussions is it's related to this Ha'amoa kind of concept. It was mentioned in some of our discussions that the Ha'amoa, where they used a rooster as a symbol of their navigation and also one of their tools. If you were to search up, go ahead and search up, let's do that right now, actually, since we have the time. To show that the rooster was a symbol that was used. We're going to add that in there, and we'll go through, share this tab. We'll go to images and see if we, right there. I know some of the comments online has been, having the rooster as a tool that was used. Yes. And I've seen other sketches as well that has the rooster on the sail. And that was an important part. And that's, from our perspective, a symbol of that clan, the Ha'amoa clan, that were the ones who went and settled Samoa. Let's see here. We'll come back here, go through a couple more of these questions. If there are any other questions from the viewers, please put in the chat as David did, and we'll go ahead and answer them as we go along. This is a funny one. And believe it or not, even my wife brought that up. That seems to be one of my go-to phrases. It's because why? And as we responded there, maybe we'll make that into a t-shirt. That seems to be a go-to phrase for me. As I explain, ask a rhetorical question. It is the because why? That's my way of introducing myself with a question to move forward with the content. This is another interesting one that we've had, Masi and I, and even others have discussed, in whether Polynesia had a written language. Obviously, the current history is all of it is purely oral, but I am definitely a believer that at some point there had to be a written history, and that's really just the thinking behind that is the only way you can accumulate knowledge is if you're able to write it down. And when we look at the vast astronomical knowledge and also, civil engineering, structural engineering, we look at some of the pyramids in Tonga, we look at the Ha'amonga Maui, we look at those things, and those have, at the very least, some basic understandings of civil engineering, structural engineering, the astronomical knowledge that Maui had. There's no way that you can track the movements of all the different constellations and also, memorizing where all these islands are without some type of written language, is my perspective, that at some point we had to have it. Now, granted, a lot of people way smarter than me with a lot more experience and know a lot more say we never had a written language throughout Polynesia. But just from that perspective, I believe that we had a written language at some point. And really the driver of decline is whenever we lost our written languages. Because once you lose the capacity to read and write, which is basically the capacity to store and to build knowledge, then you're starting to lose things across the board. So I'm definitely someone who believes that at some point we had to have had a written language amongst the Polynesians. Anybody else thinks otherwise, has any other information, put it in the comments there, and we'll bring it up on the live here. This is another interesting one from Nacho Business, the Tavaka. So I was learning this. Masi had brought this up on one of our other episodes, that is the name that's been assigned to the art of tattooing. And so that was something I was not aware of. And it sounds like, I was asking the question where that came from, what was the origin of it. Seems to be something that we was just kind of assigned to it. Not sure exactly how the Tavaka name came about. And so anybody who has any more information on that, we'll come back here to the comments. And David Totai here, I'm with y'all on us originating from the Americas. But what do you think about Polynesian introducing chicken to the Americas? Now that's a very interesting comment there, because some of the things that I've read, David, is that yes, there's DNA testing on chickens in the Americas that seem to originate from chickens in Polynesia. So there is a high probability that that's something, or at least introduced a certain type of chicken. If it wasn't, the first chicken in the Americas, but there's a high probability that Polynesians introduced a specific type of chicken into the Americas, and they have some DNA evidence that seems to indicate that. So yes, 100%, we're online there on the origin of the Polynesians from the Americas, and the real possibility, as our ancestors traveled from the Americas to Polynesia and back and forth, that maybe there was a new species or a new type of chicken that was discovered in Polynesia that our ancestors brought back to the Americas. So definitely 100%, I could see that. It's very possible, very viable as an origin. And this is just a funny comment because many times on our podcast we recognize genetic material as a data point for human beings. Now, when we're talking about chickens, I lean more on the DNA, because chickens don't make civilizations. Chickens aren't navigating back and forth and building a civilization of navigators, building political systems and astronomical knowledge. So for the chickens, David, 100%, I'm definitely a believer, and we can put a lot of stock in that. So appreciate that question, David. All right. Let me see. This is another question also from Nacho Business. He was asking about George Vason. We were having a conversation about George Vason and how that is an account that we like and we think adds some additional insight into ancient Tongan perspective. Granted, this is Tonga in decline. The Polynesian Empire is in decline. There's a lot of internal turmoil within Tonga Tapu itself. The Tu'i Tonga, it was pretty oppressive. Same reason why I believe there were the pushback from Samoa is the oppressiveness of the Tu'i Tonga, and for sure throughout Polynesia. So that rejection of the Tu'i Tonga's oppression is what pretty much led to it. And then that is about the same time Europeans were coming in to Polynesia. So another account that is pretty insightful is George Vason. And I'm going to just pull up a search here of his book. You can order it from Amazon, and it is, or you can actually search online and get a PDF version of the book. But definitely there are a lot of options online to get this book. Highly recommend for anyone looking to read into ancient Tongan, ancient Polynesian history. This is a great book to look at on top of William Mariner, and especially for early contact with Christians and how our ancestors lived life and behaved, and really a good insight into the political and social unrest that was going on in Tonga in the late 18th and early 19th century. All right. Going down to the next comment. All right. Here's a good one. And this is from original Claymore Boy 728. And on this comment, Rarotongans and Tahitians are actually, before we go into that, David has another comment here. We'll try and, keep the feedback on the comments up to date as possible as we go through. I was asking because the rooster topic y'all are talking about. Yeah, that's something that's interesting. I know there were some people on social media that kind of mocked that idea that we called Samoa Ha'amoa because of the Moa clan that went there, and that they actually used the rooster as a tool of navigation, or at least for some level of, whether it was religious, whether it was just a social construct of having a rooster as a tool for traveling. But definitely, like I showed in the picture earlier, there are sails, and it's documented in multiple different time frames and by different European boats, that there were Polynesian double outrigger canoes out there with roosters painted on the sails. So coming down here in this comment, Rarotongans and Tahitians can agree with the Tu'i Manua. To us, we call them Manuka Tere Manua, Tere, or the Great Manuka. We have no stories of going there and paying tribute to them because of some umiti, but we sing old songs of Hawaiki, Kuporu, and Manuka Tere, songs and stories rarely sung and told today because we mainly speak on the old legends and Christianity. And on Fiji, the first people to Fiji were not black. They were the same people as the rest of Polynesia. This is where the wars broke out in Fiji over the control of the lands. This is where Samoa came in, because Samoa recognized the original people of Fiji as their own. Fijians today will claim they are the start of our people. I'm not Fijian, but get a couple Fijians into this podcast and they'll get their empire came before and any other empire in the Pacific. So couple thoughts on that comment is, I recognize that the Tu'i Manua is a descendant of Tangaloa. No issues there. The real question, and possibly had influence outside, possibly, really where are the objection from our perspective is the fact that there is no real evidence or strong support from my perspective that the Tu'i Manua had a vast empire and centralized governance out of the Tu'i Manua. at best, I mean, it's very difficult for them even to make the claim that even within the islands of Samoa, that they had longevity of centralized control over Samoa themselves. And so that is a big reason why I'm kind of doubtful of the Tuimanua empire. But I don't oppose any influence outside of those islands. But in regards to an actual empire, uh, very doubtful with that from my perspective. Now, in regards to Fiji, from the little bit I can understand, Tongans obviously have always gone to Fiji to access the resources that are there, and specifically the forests to build the karias, because Tonga doesn't have a vast forest with the large trees to build the large karias. So my understanding is from the Tongans that's there were Fijians there for a very very long time, and whether there was a actual Fijian empire, for the same reasons why I have questions about whether the Tu'imanua was an actual empire. We don't have a lot of oral or recorded history that Fiji had a unified government or centralized power. Whenever you have an empire, centralized power is critical, or at least that's the general understanding of what an empire is. An empire has a centralized power in some location with control, or um, tribute of some sort of loyalty back to the seat of power. And so don't really have any history on Fiji being a centralized power governing or uniting these nations. So that's really the thinking behind that. Appreciate that comment there from the original Claymore. All right, that looks to be the same comment repeated. This is a pretty funny one. This is also from original Claymore Boy. Um, how do you guys know he got this theory from the Kava Tonga? I've been to dozens of Waikava, and you do not want to know half of the things I've seen and heard among the Kakai Tonga. Now that is hilarious. I mean, that's pretty true. And this is in response. We can see here. This is in response to our reaction video to Opeti Tariai. And really, a big reason why we made that comment is he speaks a lot about oral history, um, and where does a lot of the oral discussions happen? They happen at the Kava Circle, whether it is a formal Kava Circle. Sorry, I'm going to put the phone on mute here real quick. But yeah, that's where a lot of those discussions happen. That has been a traditional, basically, discussion. This is where ideas are presented, ideas are challenged and developed, and oral history passed down over time. And so, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to believe that he at least heard some of these things from the Kava sessions. Now, the question, and that's where the hilarity concept comes, is now whether those sessions were serious and accurate. Hey, as he mentioned in his presentation, Tongans are very poetic. And when we say poetic, sometimes very mischievous. And so some of these stories could be sent out there as bait. And I just wouldn't be surprised if some of these stories come from there. All right. We got a comment here from Slick Rick. Hey, much love and support to you and your brother, especially your dad. You guys have a lot of hearts and guts. Hey, yeah, there's it's definitely a bumpy road sometimes. And we try to keep the seriousness, not taking ourselves too serious, nor anyone else out there too serious. But we greatly appreciate the support there, Slick Rick, and to everyone there that has been positive online. We appreciate it. That's definitely something we enjoy. We also just recognize that the opposition is just part of the game. You know, there's always going to be opposition. And if you never get opposition, then that is actually a red flag within itself. When everybody seems to be in agreement, then maybe there might be, you know, the ideas are being accepted too easily and too quickly, and they're not the best ideas out there because they're not being challenged. Yes, hey, Slick Rick, I appreciate that. I see you're saying here you're out in California. I appreciate it, man. Keep fighting the good fight. So that coming back to original Claymore's comment there, that's really the driver behind it. And hey, maybe we're wrong. Maybe he didn't get this from the Kava circles, or at least none of it from it. But I'm just a little doubtful. I think a lot of this may have come from there. Yeah, come once again. This comment right here pretty much just threw this guy under the bus the whole time, talking about Dr. Opeti Taliai. And I've heard a lot of Tongans who agree with this guy. Hey, great, man. We're not throwing him under the bus. We are throwing out ideas that seem to come contradicting to what he had presented. And for all intents and purposes, you could say the same thing, that he threw a lot of people under the bus in his presentation, because basically he was, calling out Queen Salote. He's calling out a lot of the, traditional people in traditional families that have had authority and controlled the narrative for thousands of years in Tonga, threw them all under the bus by saying, the autobiographical history from his perspective. So it's part of the nature of the beast. So it is, hey, this guy, we got to bring this guy online. How is it going, Increase? This Increase is definitely very active on our social media. One of our brothers or sister who definitely gives us some friction, and we appreciate it because, like I said earlier, if everybody accepts the ideas, then maybe you're not pushing yourself enough. So, Increase, appreciate all the comments and the feedback on social media. So that I had to put you on there. So a shout out to you. That's hilarious. This guy makes me smile. Our gal, let me know if it's a bro or a sis there, Increase. But I couldn't help myself. That made me smile. He makes me smile every time I see his comments. Let's see. Let's go over a punt. Here's another one from Franco. His opinion, I feel like, let me expand this real quick, and then after this we'll probably jump over to, well, that's hilarious. Slick Rick comment here regarding to our discussion on Increase there. He lurking talk always. We gotta take that as leverage that as an opportunity to always be on our toes. But that's hilarious. That is pretty funny, Slick Rick. Thank you. All right, we'll finish off. We'll finish off the YouTube and comments here. Then we'll jump on to TikTok. But this one's very interesting, and we're actually working on having a guest on for this. And this is an opinion here by Franco. I feel like some of the early Polynesians came from the Jaredites, and I understand some of the criticisms we get is, oh, you guys believe come from the Americas because of being Latter-day Saint, in the Book of Mormon. Hey, that is one data point. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a data point that I consider. But even if I were to remove that, there is a tremendous amount of data points outside of the LDS perspective that seem to point back to the Americas as an origin, not only for Tonga, but the entire Polynesian Empire as we understand it. That's based off of astronomical knowledge, ruins that match the Americas. We're talking about mound building, the mound builders civilization, and that's going to be tied to this comment here. And just the overall concept of how we behave as a people, and how there's a lot of ties to the Americas, Anyways, we'll come back to Franco's comment here. In his opinion, it says, I feel like some of the early Polynesians came from the Jaredites. For those who are not aware, the Book of Mormon has two groups of people coming to the Americas. At the time of the Tower of Babel, there's a group that's brought over, and they're called the Jaredites. Then at about 600 years before Christ comes, another group of Jews or another group comes. These are Jews coming to Americas, those being the Nephites, so thousands of years apart from each other. That's who the Jaredites are. So just some context for the non-LDS viewers and listeners. So it says, I feel like some of the early Polynesians came from the Jaredites who landed in the Americas before Lehi's posterity. They date back to the Tower of Babel, which was approximately 2000 to 3000 BC, which was when the early Polynesians first landed in the Isles from the supposed Vaihi. Haggith, who is mentioned in the book of Alma in the 63rd chapter, was mentioned about leaving the mainland, sailing to an unknown location at 55 BC to 54 BC, and at that time, there were wars still going on between Nephites and Lamanites. I feel like Haggith and his people sailed to Aotearoa, New Zealand. I say this because the Maori culture is very aggressive and warlike, as if they left Vaihi with their culture and kept it strong in their heritage. Basically, what I'm saying is I feel like the early Tongans are more Jaredite descent versus later Polynesians are more Lehite descent. I think Joseph Fielding Smith, who dedicated the temple in New Zealand and stated a prophetic words that the early Maoris are descendants of the people of Haggith. So now that we've gone through that comment, here's the interesting thing, and I'm going to see if I can find this in the background while we're having this conversation. Is there is some discussion that I had watched on a YouTube channel called Quick Media, and there was a individual who was sharing what they saw or what they view that the Jaredites were the initial mound builders. Granted, they said that the Jaredites and the Nephites were mound builders, which, as we've discussed many times on the podcast, Tongans are extreme mound builders. Tongatapu is completely covered in man-made mounds. These are the same man-made mounds that you can find throughout North and South America. One can even make a connection to Egypt and into the Middle East. Now, I actually found the video here, and I think it'll be worth our time to share this video in response to this comment of whether the Polynesians could have been descendants of the Jaredites. So I'm going to pause it here and switch it. Share this, and we'll just watch this video real quick, and they're going to talk about.
So now let me tell you what Dr. Nibley does. Hugh will make the case that at Zarahemla, there's three guys that show up after the Jaredites are over to cause a lot of trouble. And based on their name structure, he says these guys are Jaredites. Mm-hmm. That all the Jaredites didn't die. Now, I have to agree with that because we know in New Brunswick, we've got Jaredite.
So far, what he's saying is there seems to be evidence, even within the Book of Mormon, that in Zarahemla, the capital of the Nephite civilization, there are three individuals that their origins are not shared. They just seem to pop up. And when you look at their name structure, that these name structures are Jaredite names. And so Hugh Nibley, one of the most respected historians in the LDS faith, says that these three names tend to look more like Jaredite names rather than Nephite names. So making the claim that the Jaredites were not all killed off. Granted, what we're probably leaning more towards is he's saying the civilization overall is destroyed. You probably have some pockets of people outside of the mainstream civilization that survived extinction.
We have an Adena village up there.
And Adena is the civilization that this gentleman who's what they call a Heartlander, who believes that the majority of the Book of Mormon geography happens in the United States.
400 AD. But to think that the Jaredites were 100% gathered in after being here for 1,700 years and they all died at Cumorah at 600 BC, I don't think so. I think Jaredites could be in Mexico. There could be some up in Canada. They would have gone everywhere in 1,700 years. So,
okay. So in that response to that comment here on the YouTube channel, and we're hoping to get this gentleman to join us on an episode, is in this comment, Franco, we could add in there Polynesia as a potential route, not just for Haggith, but also for the Jaredites. And maybe that's where Haggith got this idea of leaving the Americas and going to the Pacific or to Polynesia, because maybe they understood that the Jaredites may have done the same thing. All right, we'll skim here. Not sure if anything else. Once again, increase always definitely a main commenter here on our Facebook, or sorry, our YouTube channel here. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our TikTok comments here and give some initial comments here to those on TikTok who have given some comments. We've had a lot of activity on TikTok the last few weeks, so we appreciate it. We'll just start with the newest comments, like as we mentioned. It looks like our co-host here is busy, so Masi is out there in Aotearoa, tied up with some family commitment there, and so he wasn't able to make the live today, but we wanted to come out here and keep giving some responses to some of the commentary. So malo Masi, appreciate it. Have fun today. All right, we'll start with this comment right here. And this is tied to a clip that we pushed out that made the claim, and I'll walk through it in relative detail here. Appreciate, any comments from the viewers here, shoot it in the comments here, because we're going to cover quite a bit regarding this question. So the claim of the clip that we posted, let me just do this. Let's play the clip here so people can listen to the clip, and then we will dive into the response. Okay, let's get some audio going.
There is no empire that is active to this day that's older than Tonga. And there's a reason why, because there is a rich history of political survival, governance, religious dedication, and social stability that led to Tonga being independent for thousands and thousands of years up until.
It is the oldest active, uninterrupted title in Tonga than probably any other ancient civilization that still was, because a lot of them still kind of folded. But like what we said, the Tui Tonga lineage still lives on to the current kings today. Through the Tui, the Tui Hatagalauan into the Tui Kanupolu. So yeah, I mean, and Tonga was never colonized by an external force to kind of interrupt that reign of our current king. So
there is no.
All right. So that's where this comment is primarily derived from. It's in a response to that video, and we'll walk through it. The Ethiopian civilization is definitely an ancient civilization, and a lot of people seem to miss it because it's a very short time frame that the Ethiopians gave up their sovereignty. And that's the clarification that we'll give here is Tonga is the longest uninterrupted, independent, self-governing civilization on Earth. Okay, that is the claim. And so this gentleman right here, Baldy Jack, is commenting that Ethiopia was never colonized and probably the oldest civilization in the world today. For 5 years in World War II, Ethiopia surrendered their sovereignty to the Italians, called the Abyssinian Crisis. and the Italians for 5 years took control over Ethiopia from Selassie. And so that's a short period of time, but yes, Ethiopia lost their independence. This is also true of Japan in World War II. A lot of the comments that we had on Facebook and in social media was Japan's in the Pacific. They're the longest active civilization. Our position is when they surrendered, full and complete surrender to the United States, the Emperor of Japan was no longer the supreme sovereign of Japan. And so that's where we're kind of rolling back to, is that's how we're making the claim that Tonga is the oldest, uninterrupted, self-governing civilization on Earth today. And that's a pretty bold claim. We're relatively comfortable with that claim. And anybody who finds something that disproves that now in matters of another of the items that's discussed is Tonga was a protectorate of the United Kingdom. There's a huge distinction with the complete surrender of Japan, Ethiopia to a foreign power than being a protectorate. And there's some nuance there that we'll walk through. Tonga never lost governance of its internal affairs. England never dictated to Tonga how to conduct its internal affairs. This is the equivalent of making a treaty with a foreign power, which Tonga had done many times. Tonga had treaties with the Germans. Tonga had treaty with America, with the United Kingdom, with France. And the whole strategy behind Tonga building those treaties was to ensure that Tonga would be protected from foreign powers, in the sense that England, France, Germany, United States, we're all friends. If anybody were to try to invade me, you guys would help protect me from that invasion. In a sense, Tonga took its protectorate strategy from 4 different global powers and consolidated it into the United Kingdom. And the primary driver behind that was Tonga was in debt after Tupou II. Tonga was in severe debt. We were at high risk of colonization. And one of the strategies to eliminate that risk was to consolidate the protectorate system through the multiple treaties into one treaty. Hey, and why not make it with the superpower of the time, the nation with the strongest navy, Tonga being an island? If you're Germany and you have the best army in the world, you ain't equipped to protect Tonga because you need land to be effective with an army. And so going with the British made a lot of sense, and that was the whole relationship there. So Tonga once again maintained its independence, self-governing and centralized government, independent from any other foreign power. So that's really pretty much the driver behind that. Oh, what a nice little comment here from Trey, but why are you the only guests on the Expletive podcast? We are working on guests. We've already shot our first episode with a guest, and we'll continue to have many more. We're continuing to invite people. We've even invited people from the Tu'imanua position. We haven't had a lot of success. We have one potential guest that will join us to present the Tu'imanua position. And really, we're not looking to prove or disprove during the episode itself. What we will do is we will allow the individuals that we bring on first. We want to know who they are, where they come from, their background, get an opportunity to learn and grow our horizons through their experiences and their knowledge. Then our secondary part or goal of having these guests on is to present anything that they find important. And in this scenario, with someone who promotes the Tu'imanua concept, is to have them present that concept, provide the evidence, provide the ideas. We may ask some questions for clarification and just out of interest, but we're not going to look to have a debate online on the podcast. We will do the further discussions and detailed responses, quote unquote, the rebuttals, maybe after the fact. And the same thing with the guest. They can go on their social media and give rebuttals to our rebuttal when we give it in a future episode. So to my brother here, Trey, we will have guests. We've already shot one. We'll probably release the first guest podcast, I would probably say this weekend. And so we're going to be working on that, and we'll have many more to come. So, and if anyone's interested in joining us, presenting a position and idea of the history throughout Polynesia, feel free to reach out to us. We'd more than be willing to share that with you. Here's another one from Bondot's commented that Tui Tonga is perhaps maybe half Samoan, but Tonga is in the name of the title food for okay. And this is something that's kind of brought up many times from those who, you know, espouse the idea of the Tui Manua and that really the fact that the Tui Tonga many times in the Tui Kanukupolu, and for all intents and purposes, probably the Tui Hatakalauas as well, were half Samoan. Okay. And I really I think the perspective that we need to have here is under the Tongan Empire, there was no quote unquote independent nation of Samoa separate from Tonga. This was, or different people. We were all one people. I kind of, the best example I can give of this is one village marrying the next village. We were all the same people, same civilization, same history and background. So for all intents and purposes, the Tui Tonga marrying, I mean, there's discussions of Tui Tonga marrying Samoans, Hawaiians, and a variety of women throughout the Polynesian Empire. That makes a lot of sense from a logistical aspect of maintaining power, relationships, and that's an important aspect of maintaining an empire. So once again, of course, a lot of the Tui Tongas and so forth had Samoan mothers, but as Masi has consistently expressed, the male heir was always a Tongan, right? And that's how you maintain stability. That's how you maintain structure and control over an empire, is the heir being from the seat of power. Here's another interesting, here's another potential guest that we're looking to have join us is King Afa. He provides great content. He's pushing it out there. He's willing to have conversations and promote the ideas that he has. Great on him. And to all the content creators in our community, I mean, we encourage all of that all the time. So Was of the Sky put this comment: King Afa lived in Tonga and sat at the kava participating in the Talanoa. He also studied under Professor Helu. Both Mahina and Talia studied under him. I don't think there are any biases. Hey, fair point. You know, we all have bias. We all have our thoughts based and shaped off of our background. But really, that's what it comes down to, is a lot of times these people who are sharing competing ideas are very familiar with each other. So I think it's a good thing that we have all these types of discussions. So yeah, that's the route we're going to go there. All right, let's look at a couple more. Got my kids here banging on the door. This is Underground Roads. You can get Dr. Devita Kairi and James Cocker from New Zealand Genealogists. Hey, 100%. We're very open to that, and actually we encourage that. Anyone who's willing to connect us, we would love to do that. Like I said, the intent is to get to know the guest. We'll give them the opportunity to share with us their background, share their ideas, and we're not looking to debate during the episode. We want to give them the opportunity to present the idea as fully as possible, and then the viewers and the listeners can make up their minds after the fact. Let me see. We'll go through maybe a couple more here on TikTok. Let me see. Here, actually, you know what? We may watch this video. We did have a viewer of the podcast and a follow on social media share a story. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% familiar with it. Let's just go ahead and pull it up here. And we'll show it here. I'll give some initial feedback on the video itself. I think it's this one. So this video, I mean, they did a pretty good job on the quality of the video. And this is a representation of one of the oral histories, apparently, on how Tonga was discovered. And we'll take a look at it, give a reaction. Once again, if there's any questions or comments from the viewers, shoot it in the chat here, in the comments, and we'll try and address it as we go along. But we'll go ahead and share this and get some initial feedback. Let me get this banner out of the way so that we can see the full video. We'll pause that real quick. I do want to come back to that. Let's see. And it's basically this. But the Maui clans were always at Lolofonua. Yeah, granted, we've covered this. This is the eastern part, close to where the Ha'amonga is where the Maui clans were. Obviously, this is an area of deviation from what our position is. Our position is that Maui has been and was always the holder of the navigational knowledge. And granted, tied to the navigation knowledge is astronomical knowledge. And that astronomical knowledge is tied to farming, right? Because astronomical knowledge tells you the seasons, it tells you the times. And so there were crops and so forth that were dictated by that timing, by the season, as determined by the coming and going of certain planets as stars and constellations, and more importantly, the position of the sun throughout the year told you the best times to plant certain crops. But that our position is that Maui always had the astronomical knowledge. That's what he brought to Polynesia. And we'll get into how that is related to the hook that's discussed later on. But yeah, we'll continue here on the reaction. That's another interesting thing is we'll come back here. That there are two Mauis here. Typically, from our perspective, we would say there was only one Maui at a time because Maui was a title that was held. And so Maui Atalanga and Maui Kisikisi would suggest that there were multiple Mauis at the same time, meaning two people holding the same title from our perspective would not make sense. And so that's another thing that we're not necessarily in agreement with this account. And that's the other thing too, is it says, Maui and them always lived in Lolofonua. I'm assuming that the interpretation here that was the underworld, and that when they chose to move to Mama, I do hear a lot of different or new ideas coming from the academic world that Langi is Samoa, Mama is Tonga, and that Pulotu is Fiji, and that was a designation. So under this representation, it would be saying that Maui is coming from the underworld, or the two Mauis are coming from the underworld up to Mama, to Tonga. So if Mama is Tonga, how is it that they moved to Tonga, but then later on they're going to fish up the island of Tonga? So some interesting things to consider there. So once again, this is taking the interpretation that Langi is the sky being pushed up to heaven. We take a more literal interpretation that Langi was on Tongatapu. That's where Tangaloa lived, and there's a specific location on Tongatapu that is identified with where Tangaloa resided. An additional comment to that about Siufonua, or fishing of land. This is really not a literal interpretation or representation of pulling land from the ocean. This is related to navigating the ocean, discovering or identifying a new island, then populating it or returning, and then coming back and populating that island, and adding that specific location of that island into the knowledge of the Polynesian Empire, of how to get there and get back to Tongatapu is the way we would perceive it in our end. And so it's not a literal idea of pulling up land from the ocean. So once again, I mean, as it's going through, there's some interesting things there. They're saying they're coming from Tonga to Samoa to get the hook to pull the land out of the ocean, and yet they're already in Tonga. So some interesting things to consider there. So they go to quote unquote Manua. They find Tonga Fusifonua's wife there, and so they're talking about the fish hooks and all these things that are happening, and that they're going to ask Tonga Fusifonua for the opportunity to make a selection on a hook. I don't know what happened to the sound. I remember being sound all the way across. Anyways, we'll pause it there. So basically, he comes back. The wife really, lets them know which is the proper hook to select. They select the proper hook. They go and they pull out Tonga, right? And this is the hook. So the interesting thing to take into account here is if that the hook is a representative of the Hook of Maui constellation, and that was the actual constellation that was used to navigate the Pacific Ocean. And so that was a major constellation that was used to identify, record where a island existed so that they could go and bring people and bring kava to that island and establish a settlement, so to speak. So the knowledge of understanding how to use Maui's hook was a knowledge that Maui maintained. We're not of the thinking that Maui was given this knowledge after the fact. This was knowledge that Maui, the great navigator, had, and that's what he brought to Polynesia. All right. Well, let's go back here and look at some of the additional comments here before we possibly close out this live stream today. We'll just go to the comments. We'll go through a couple more. Once again, we're running live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter or X. Yeah, here's another one. Just follow up with T here. We're talking about all these different families. We'd love to have a guest join us to represent what their perspective is on the Tu'umanua Empire, the Tuipolotu Empire that we hear a lot about. Very difficult for us to find evidence from our perspective to support those. Here's another interesting thing. Origin Semitic script developed in ancient Egypt. We did get an interesting message from one of the viewers, and I just want to pull it up because we are going to dig into it. And it is basically looks like an article that someone had put together of potentially Maui measuring the longitude of the earth. And I had never heard of this, but this is something that we may take a look into in the future. And I'll share this tab. I appreciate. Let me see who actually shared that with us, so I could give that. I think that was that on YouTube. Can't remember who sent that to us, but it was one of the viewers and the followers of the podcast. They shared this website with us, and very interesting. Something I had never come across before, where they're kind of proposing an idea of an experiment, something that leads them to believe that Maui had developed a contraption that helped them measure the longitude of the earth. That was something very interesting. Yeah, and coming back to your comment there, Slick Rick, I'll post it up here so everyone can take a look at it. And this is directly related to that. Slick Rick, is this idea. Very interesting. We'll take a look at it, and I don't know either whether it's true or not, Slick Rick. That was something that was interesting. The reality is this, in my perspective, we severely underestimate the capacity and the sophisticated nature of our ancestors. We have this idea that since we have this type of science, and granted, science is great. Science has given us definitely a lot of advantages that our ancestors didn't have. but they had a lot of other things that apparently we don't have today and we can't appreciate. Prime example are the Egyptians. We have no idea how these people were able to construct some of the things that they constructed. This is also true of the Americas. There are some things that have been accomplished by human beings thousands of years ago that are ahead of our quote unquote scientific capabilities and technology today. And one can really, there's two ways to look at how sophisticated a civilization is. We can look at the complexity of how we do things today and say, great, that's one way to see how sophisticated we are. The other one is to see how simple certain tools were used by our ancestors, and yet we're able to accomplish the significant tasks that we can't do today. One could argue that that is more advanced, to have something that is as effective but is much more simple and much more effective. One could make the claim that possibly our ancestors were way more advanced than we are. And just kind of that last comment there, Slick Rick, 100% agree. We don't know if it's true or not, but this was kind of interesting in one of the messages that we received from the viewers and followers of the podcast. And we're going to check it out. This is something very interesting. You know what I may do? I'm going to put this in the chat as well for any of the viewers who want to take a look at it. I do know that depending on where you're watching, if you're on YouTube, this may pop up. Looks like it made it onto Facebook, but on Twitter, it's probably not going to make it on. So any of the viewers on X, you won't see the link, but on YouTube and Facebook, it looks like the message went through. This is the link to this page, and may be of interest to you guys. So just wanted to shoot that over. All right, come back here. You know what? Let me search that up, Slick Rick. Let's look that up. You by chance able to share a link on that, but I can just do a general search here online. But let's close out this live with that question, Slick Rick, because I think either you or someone else had brought this up previously in some of the commentary. Okay, I'll jump on YouTube here and we'll take a quick search for that. Okay. So yeah, so Easter Island, and I guess I tried to put Ahu in there, but it didn't go in. We'll put that in. You know what? I think I may have seen this once. And it may have been by Tonga Easter Island. This may have been, I think, by a French dude who went to Wallis and Futuna, and he was visiting some of the Tongan forts in Wallis and Futuna, and then he also yeah, it's this dude right here.
If you're a man,
this is
making at
the
least
dude that I
150
saw.
grand a year and you're still embarrassed to take your shirt off at the pool, I will.
Hello, this is Vec. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for viewing my videos today. I'm in the beautiful and very historic Easter Island here in the South Pacific Ocean. Now, we do know from archaeological evidence that the first inhabitants of Easter Island arrived from Polynesia, quite possibly between 700 and 1100 AD. So when
I will say on the timing there, that is close to what if you know, A lot of people say that Aho Etu was at 4 or 900 AD. David Tafale's timeline would say as late as 450 AD, but possibly earlier. With the excavations that they did on the third settlement of the Tuitonga, it pushes that timeline back 700 years. So there's a real possibility that Aho Etu is in the BC timeframe at 700 AD ish. According to what this gentleman's saying, the Tongan Empire is at its peak. Kaulufonua is probably having at least 15 to 20 island nations in the Tongan Empire. So this is an interesting time frame because we could definitely say this is at the prime position for the Tuitonga Empire.
They first arrived, they built a very basic marae, the places where religious rituals were held at. These are the same marae that we see all around Polynesia and the Cook Islands, in Rarotonga, for example. After 1100, the marae developed into ahu, the beautiful platforms that you've seen pictures of or videos of. And that's where they placed the very first moai, the magnificent, enigmatic, fascinating statues of Easter Island. But something happened around 1300 AD. There was a substantial change in the architecture of the ahu. Now, around 1300 AD, we start.
And that's an interesting thing right there, because 1300 AD, you at that time frame, you're already looking at the Tu'iha Takalaua is kind of running the government at that point, because the Tu'itonga pretty much delegates all administrative parts on the temporal side, so to speak, to the Tu'iha Takalaua, which could explain some of these shifts in the design and new approaches to the ruins and the structures, possibly. Or it could be, according to, what is it, Franco, who was saying that there could have been two migrations from the U.S., the Jaredites, and then also the Nephites. That's another potential idea there. Yeah, probably earlier, 100%.
Seeing the development of much larger ahu. The ahu now have to support the 6, 8, and 10 meter moai standing on them on the platforms. At least 60 tons of weight per moai. That's a tremendous weight to be applied on the platform. As a result, we see more sophisticated bases around the platforms, around the ahu. We see the carving of huge stone slabs now fitting very closely together. But there's another characteristic of the ahu they are starting to see here around the same time frame, and it is the development of the multi-layered ahu. We start seeing a second layer placed on the ahu, and that's where the moai will be placed on now on the second layer. Now, this is very, very important from an architectural perspective. It takes tremendous knowledge of engineering in order to achieve that, in order to build another layer on top of an existing ahu that would sustain the tremendous weight of the moai. Where did this knowledge come from?
I'm going to pause it right there, because as I mentioned earlier on the changes in kind of governmental structure within Tonga, somewhere around that time, I'm going to have to just step away from this real quick. And I want to kind of show let me see here, window, the type of civil engineering that is happening within a couple hundred years of that same time frame on Tongatapu, that could, some interesting connections to the civil engineering change that he's sharing here on Easter Island. And we discussed this slightly in one of our other episodes with Masi, and it has to do with the last settlement of the Tuitonga. And it is basically this this whole area right here on Tongatapu in Mua is all landfill. So this is land right here that didn't exist. These are man-made. This is basically an extension of the main island. This is where the Kauhala Uta and the Kauhala Lalo concept comes from. And so this whole area, it's just over 100 acres, I believe, is all man-made, and you still have people living on that land to this day. And we cover this on one of the other podcasts, but I bring this up because this could be tied to this change and update in technology that this gentleman is now sharing that he saw or they see at Easter Island. And so thought that would be interesting to bring up as a potential connection there. So we'll come back to the gentleman who is talking about what he's seeing on Easter Island.
I think I have the answer. As the ahu here at Easter Island were growing in size and complexity and in layers, there was a very important event that was taking place here in the South Pacific, an event that many historians discount and do not take into account when they explore and investigate what happened here at Easter Island. That event I'm talking about, of course,
We'll pause it right there to kind of bring up that additional question from David here on YouTube. Yes, this is one of the reasons why we point heavily to the Americas, because the sun gates, the pyramids, the mound building civilization all match things that you see in North America, right? There are sun gates in North America. There's the double V that was carved on the top of the Ha'amonga. There was a double V that is a pattern that is directly tied to the equator, to the two tropics on the north and the south of the equator. It also is directly tied to the movement of the sun. And so all these things are pointing back to the Americas as the origin of our civilization. And so 100%, David, we see a lot of those connections pointing back to the Americas, and they are very, very convincing from our perspective. And yes, going back, Slick Rick, they all look the same, very similar. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of connections there that you can't just ignore.
is the Tongan Empire, the Tonga Tui. It was a tremendous empire, very, very powerful. It rose really, the peak of the empire was between 1200 and 1500 AD. You can see what happened here. The Tongans took over Fiji, Samoa, Wallis and Futuna, and other areas of the Pacific. So the historians point to the expansion of the Tongan Empire west and north, but nobody's looking east where Easter Island is located at. Now, if you go to Tonga and you go to the ancient town of La Paja, you will see multi-layered pyramids or langi. I will submit to you that those langi are exactly the multi-layered ahu that you see here at Easter.
This guy is definitely onto something from our perspective. And really, I believe the reason why nobody's looking east is primarily because of the confusion of trying to understand the seat of power for the Polynesian Empire. Because there's this lack of understanding, I think, or unification to the origin and the center of the Polynesian Empire. You know, we got the Tui Manua that has certain claims out there online. We have the Tui Pulotu from Fiji. That seems to just cause confusion and lack of clarity. And so really we really need to find out what exactly happened back then as much as we can, because once we can kind of unify the thinking that, hey, look, we were all one people, the Tui Tonga who inherited from Tangaloa, who all lived on Tongatapu, they are the original centers of power for the Polynesian Empire, then all of a sudden we're looking at thousands of years of consistent rule, consistent unification. This is what facilitates an empire to expand, right? If there's this quote unquote shifting of power between these empires, makes it a little bit more difficult to say we could expand all the way to the Americas, all the way to Southeast Asia, all the way up north. This is where I think this gentleman is on to something, and obviously he's already aligned, saying things that are aligned with my thought process. So there could be some bias in there, but I can't. He's making good points. The ruins, the technology that he's seeing over there seems to be matching. Here's another comment that comes up here from David. There's another connection with the megaliths in Europe. There's definitely a consistent group or civilization that we'll call it of mound builders in Egypt. You find them in different parts of Europe. You find them in the Americas, and you find them in Polynesia, and especially on Tongatapu. Tongatapu is flooded with the ruins that matches the mound builders that are found literally around the world.
Easter Island, same architecture, same layout, same size.
Yeah.
And why do historians really discount that? Maybe they have never visited Tonga, they have never seen a Langi in La Paja. Let's go to the documentary and let's explore this possibility. And I will submit to you without a doubt the multi-layered ahu that you see here at the Langi of La Paja from Tongatapu in Tonga. Let's go to the video. Okay, my friends, unfortunately, we're going to have to record this video under severe winds. It is very, very windy here along the southern coast of Easter Island. In any case, you're looking at the magnificent ahu of Akahanga, which was built on or about 1300 AD, and it is a magnificent ahu of over 80 meters in length. And at one time, it had over 12 moai on top. What's really unique about this ahu that you see here, it is a complete replica of a Langi from La Paja. You don't believe me? Well, let's walk along the front and let's identify the different parts that make this ahu so special here at Easter Island, so much more special than the one in Tongariki, where all the tourists go.
Braden has amazed me. He's so
To.
So there's a couple. We'll pause it right there, and we'll bring out this comment from Slick Rick. There's a video of Tonga and shows the Langi. Then they go to the sky view and trip me out because how the Milky Way stars are aligned to the Langi and Ha'amonga is a trip. Very interesting. I am not aware of this video that you're mentioning there, Slick Rick. But I will say this. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the mounds that are found, obviously, in Egypt have astronomical significance and alignment. You go to the mounds in the Americas, they have astronomical significance and alignment. So it is not far-fetched to see something like that. And actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the Milky Way, because the Milky Way, there are two roads that in ancient Tongan history that are tied to the Maui and to Tangaloa. And the first one is Tangaloa's road is the equator, right? Because that's where the movement of the sun, it's tied to the equator. Maui's road is the Milky Way. And so those are the two main roads that are used to quote unquote navigate the entire globe, right? At nighttime, you use Maui's road. That's the constellation. And the Milky Way is that road that you see in the sky. And it is, in 30 years ago, even as close as 20 years ago, academics were not really open to the idea that Polynesians were great navigators. And, the easy response was, oh, these savages, and, they didn't have a North Star in the South, so everything moves. So how could these, technologically disadvantaged civilization navigate to the Southern Hemisphere? But really the key is, because you have Maui's road, the Milky Way, and you can study the patterns of the Milky Way as it turns at different times of the year. And as you understand how that road rotates in the night sky, you can make the adjustments to determine the direction in which you're heading. That is also true of Tangaloa's road, which is the Milky Way that cuts the Earth into two hemispheres. Understanding the movement of the sun during the day at different seasons and different times also helps you to give direction. So with that comment right there, Slick Rick, wouldn't be surprised one bit if a study were to be done on that, to find that there are certain constellations that are tied to the locations of these structures. We'll come back here to the video.
Now, without a doubt, somebody is going to write to me and say, well, Vic, yeah, I can understand what you're saying, but that's impossible. It is impossible for Tongans to have arrived at Easter Island. That's because of the distance. Fiji, Samoa, Wallis of Futuna are very close to Tonga. And I will say, well, that is absolutely wrong. And that's because we're discounting what the Tongans were using at the time between 1200 and 1500 AD. They were using canoes, double hull canoes that would outpace any European ship in construction at that point in time. The canoes, the double hull canoes, could carry up to 100 people. They could travel up to 18 miles per hour. That's correct. 18 miles per hour. They could cover the distance between Tonga and Easter Island in less than 15 days. So why do the historians really discount this possibility that the Tongans arrived here at Easter Island and they greatly influenced this ancient civilization here? And we can see from the Ahu, we can see from the platforms built, we can see from the architecture here. So what is it about this Ahu that makes it so different from all the other ones?
I'm gonna pause it real quick, because he makes a very valid statement there. Okay. I don't think a lot of people appreciate the size of the Tongan Karias, right? And so I want to bring up a picture here real quick. And this is a sketch of the Tongan Karias, right? And the type of storage that they were kept in when they weren't out at sea. Look at the size of these things. And that's assuming that this is one of the largest ones that you'll see. And I'm just going to hide the comment here so that we can see some of the subheadings in the image here. The Karia from Tonga. So these are look like adults, and look in comparison to the size of these Karias and the distances that they could have traveled. And that is assuming that that's the largest one that you'll see. Who's to say that there aren't other ones that are much larger than that one? So for academics to really discount the capacity of the Tongan Navy, and that's really what made Tonga, have the strategic advantage than any other island group that we can think of right now, is a superior navy. No different than the English Empire. Tonga had a superior navy. What made Ma'afu so successful in Fiji? Superior navy. He was able to move more freely on the waters. He didn't have as much success on land, because that wasn't necessarily the advantage that he brought to the table. And so a superior navy seems to be a standard of the Tongan Empire, which makes sense. And so, yeah, these Kariya are by far the most advanced, even to this day. I mean, when we go to the America Cup competition, right, which is basically the high speed sailing competition that they have out there, they are basically utilized. Granted, these are been modified severely, but they're using the Polynesian technology that we've had for thousands and thousands of years to build these ships, and these are the ships that they're using to sail in competitive sailing. So we're talking, like, once again, like we mentioned earlier, these technologies, though simpler, one could make the argument that they're more advanced because of how simple the technology is, yet how effective it is at achieving its goal. So once again, we look at these America Cup sailing ships that are going at high speeds, and then we say, well, look at that, and then look at this. It is just an updated, modernized version of the Kariya. And so, hey, hard to argue with this gentleman and the position he's sharing of, yes, the Tongans could easily get to Easter Island and easily could have gotten to the Americas and easily could have gone all the way west to Asia.
What is it about this ahu that resembles a langi from La Paja in Tonga? Well, it's not the bottom layer here. You can see the stone slabs here forming the base of the ahu, the base of the platform. All the ahu have a base. Although this one, you can see it's a newer base because the stones are carved in straight lines. So that's a good indication this is an ahu on or about or after 1300 AD. Otherwise, the stones here on the base will be very rough. What really makes it different is that up there, the second layer. This is the first time a second layer gets added to an ahu. And what's really important is over 12 moai, 16 tons each. At one time, we're standing up there on the second layer. And the bottom layer that you see here had to withstand the pressure and the weight from these enormous statues on top of the second layer. How did this happen? How could you engineer something so that you place 12 moai, or at least 12 moai, 60 tons each on the second layer, and the pressure from the weight does not really destroy the bottom layer, and as a result, the whole thing would come down in pieces, and it didn't happen. It requires very special knowledge, very good engineering knowledge on how to construct this pyramid. And this is what happened in Tonga.
And he's making a direct connection with the Langis. And as we showed earlier on the Google Earth, there's 100 acres of man-made land in La Paja, right? And this is the type of civil engineering that we're talking about. He's right on from my perspective. He's talking about civil engineering that endures hundreds to thousands of years. Same thing in La Paja with that landfill, right? Hundreds of acres that people are living on to this day is an extension that is man-made.
They knew exactly how to construct multi-layer.
Right now, it is a time of war in Israel. Many of our
langi. And the same knowledge was applied here. Unfortunately, we cannot go on the Ahu, so you can see the second layer up there.
Wouldn't be
Cannot do that.
surprised, David. We haven't done a lot
Here's
of study
view
on
of
the
what I believe
Langis,
is the strongest evidence
so I think that's a real
that
possibility.
engineering knowledge was borrowed from the Tongans in order to develop this very explicit, fascinating Ahu here. You can see the second layer up there, and it runs for about 80 meters. Now, what they have done here on the second layer, they also put red scoria. You can see some of them up there. You can see the red color with petroglyphs. So they decorated the second layer with petroglyphs with different designs on the red scoria, which is much softer to carve. Here's another view of this fascinating place here, Easter Island. And this is what I'm talking about. You need to look into it. Why did this Ahu appear right at the height of the Tongan Empire?
Mhm.
How was
Very
it
good
built?
question.
With what knowledge? Who designed it? And why?
And this is the kind of stuff that, you know, I'm not trying to be rude to the quote unquote Tui Manua and the Tui Polotu quote unquote empires. Where is this kind of stuff that makes us want to consider those ideas? Very difficult for me personally. Obviously, people can say I'm biased. Hey, probably so, but not every idea that is biased is incorrect. It just, the more biased it is, the less likely is correct, but it could still be correct. And there are many other data points outside of what this gentleman is highlighting here.
Why all of a sudden did they decide to build a second layer? Tongariki has one layer only, and it is one of the biggest Ahu here in Easter Island. Who came up with the idea for the second layer? It's the Tongans. They arrived here using the double hull canoes. They taught the locals how to do it. Now, the locals did not borrow the Tongan language, of course. That's where everybody bases their conclusion that the inhabitants of Rapa Nui were always Polynesian. But the locals certainly borrowed technology from the Tongans.
And I'm actually, this is where I lean more heavily. I am much more open to the idea that there were already inhabitants on these islands. Not always, but very open that there were inhabitants. This is why I lean more towards the ideas or the foundational concepts of the Tongan civilization that built the Polynesian Empire. And that is the injection of technology, religion, government structure, and consistency of operating motives that established the Polynesian Empire. And so I'm very open to what he's saying, that, hey, could have been people on Easter Island. The Tongans show up. They've built out an empire throughout Polynesia. They're injecting new technology, new political and social structure into the existing islands, resulting in ruins like this that you find on throughout Tongatapu. You can find these similar structures in Samoa. You can find them in Tahiti. You can find them, Wallis and Futuna. These are the ruins that we point to that say Tongan Empire. I don't see a lot of that for the Fijian or the quote unquote Samoan Empire, but this gentleman here is making a significant connection here from my perspective. Here's another question here out of YouTube from David. I forgot to mention this earlier, but in the account of the Jaredites, and we're going to have a gentleman, we're going to invite him. Hopefully he joins us to speak out about mound builders in the Americas who were basically all like 7-footers, right? Very large people that could have migrated into Polynesia, resulting into that size. So I wouldn't be surprised if we find some of those larger skeletons and so forth, David. It's a real possibility, but until we kind of give archaeologists the opportunity to go in there, I totally understand why the royal family hasn't really allowed that to happen, but maybe one day in the future, and we'll see what's in those langis in Tonga.
The best technology you could find. Look at these stone slabs here, how beautifully
Yeah.
carved they are. And look at my video where I describe the
Looks
langi,
just like Tonga.
and tell me if this is not exactly the same technology. The same layers that you see up there applied from the langi here at the Ahu of Easter Island, 4,500 miles away. A short 15-day trip on the remarkable Tongan canoes, double hull canoes. Absolutely incredible, magnificent, and certainly worth a further study. If I was to do my PhD in history, this is what I would select to do. This is what I would select to study. Here's the last view of the second layer up there, the magnificent Ahu of Akahanga here in Easter Island. Wow, it is an interesting proposition, isn't it? It is definitely one to be researched and investigated further.
Yes.
Now, I keep listening to tour guides here. Whenever I see a group, I listen to see what the tour guides say, and they all sing the same song. They all have learned their lesson from the same book. There is not a single word about Tonga. They ignore completely this huge empire that developed between 1200 and 1500 and quite potentially influenced what happened here at Easter Island.
This is also my criticism of the academia community, is they're all doing the same thing like these tour guides, right? And unfortunately, it's not about digging up what's true and being creative and really trying to understand what our people did and accomplished. It feels more like they're just patting each other on the back and just building off of it. Get my PhD. Maybe your thesis on your PhD was incorrect. And there's nothing wrong with that. We understand how the educational system works, right? You got to go in, understand, you learn, you sometimes have to provide what the material put in front of you is, analyze the material in front of you, play the game, get the paper. I can understand that to a degree. But then to this totally commit and disregard our history, to hold tight to other professors and other ideologies that could be totally dangerous to our history, I don't quite understand that. Before we continue the video here, just another comment from social media. David, once again, yeah, I'm hoping we're alive to see that day as well, when we can get more access for archaeologists into the langis, and you know, that day may come, but currently so far they haven't been given that access. But that would be an awesome thing to be able to have that insight. All right, we'll close out this video here. We're getting close to the end, but this is a fantastic video, and Slick Rick, thank you for bringing up that idea so we could close out this live stream with this video.
And there's no better evidence than the architecture of the Ahu. They resemble exactly, they don't resemble, but they are exactly the langi of La Paja in Tongatapu. And that's my proposition. And somebody needs to look into it and change the history here, the history books. This is Vic, all the way from Easter Island. Bye-bye.
Mr. Vic, I appreciate that. That is fantastic. We're definitely on board with that. We think there's a lot of information regarding Polynesian history that needs to be dug up and needs to be considered. And I just hope that we can get to it. Appreciate that recommendation there, Slick Rick. That was a great way to end the live show here. Another comment. I don't disagree. I think it's a a couple things there, David, in regards to the academia. That's definitely one of them. And actually that would be the one that I would be the most tolerant to, right? It's just, hey, I got other competing priorities, gotta go work to feed my family, blah, 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 all those things. So I'm not gonna dive into the details and really push back. There's other ones that are just, people are just fine with falling in line, and they may know that it doesn't align with our oral history, and they're actively pushing against it, right? That I'm hoping that is not the case, but I will say that sometimes when I see what's going on, I can't help but wonder if that's what's going on, is people are actively pushing against it, even though they think or know that our history is what it is. With that being said, we're going to go ahead, close out the stream for today. Appreciate everyone's time. Appreciate all the comments from social media, and all the support, even the people who are giving us some opposition. That is needed. We welcome it. We recommend it, because that's how we figure out whether we believe what we believe, really do believe it. Because if there's no opposition, then there's no resistance to make us question and also improve the position and improve the ability to express it. We are by no means professionals at this, but we enjoy our history. We think we have a lot to offer the world. And we definitely think that it's important that all of our Polynesians, brothers and sisters out there, that we remind ourselves of the great Polynesian Empire that existed, and that it means something to us, and it can mean something very important to the world, and that we need to make sure we dig as much as we can into our history and be able to bring those unique capabilities, those unique social, and governmental concepts to the world. It could be a great value and asset to the rest of the world. Once again, thank you to everyone. Appreciate it. We're going live on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. And till next time, everybody have a great day and stay curious. Peace.